You'll find Christopher Newport, that's somebody to research, Christopher Martin, and who they're saying they called Thomas was the ensign, E-N-S-I-G-N. And what you will find out is all of that had to do with Wayan Senekop, or Hana Senekop in some dispensations. Yeah. And you'll find that we all are actually family based off of that, and that's not far. 1602 is those records. Yes, and it's us. But I saw that 3 years ago, but it's not till now that it's like coming full circle, and I'm just like, wow. So we really are all family. It's a matter of us being reminded. With that, I yield the floor. What do you want me to do next? What's my instruction?
Back in the Bible.
Okay, I brought my Bible too. Okay, got you. You want me to go straight to it, or you just want me to keep reading where I left off at? Yeah. Okay, indeed. Innumerable is where, and there I found very many islands filled with people innumerable, and of them all I have taken possession for their highnesses by proclamation made and with the royal standard unfurled, and no opposition was offered to me. I'm going to read that one more time. And there I found very many islands filled with people innumerable, and of them all I have taken possession for their highnesses by proclamation made and with the royal standard unfurled, and no opposition was offered to me. The following is an excerpt taken from an 8th grader's, that's usually a 13-year-old, 8th grader's test from a final examination administered at Salinas, Kansas, North America, in the year 1895. The question was number 2. I have that book too, Brother Taj, as well.
Yes.
The 1895 test?
Yes.
This is Mataoaka, the woman called Rebecca, my Brother Taj.
Go ahead.
All right. The question was number 2 in the test, and the answer given by the 8th grader is shared for your intellectual, historical, and socialization examination and political analysis. Question given in 8th grade test. Give an account of the discovery of America by Columbus. Answer given by the 8th grader. They sailed from Palos on August 3rd, 1492. That's Leo, by the way. And headed into unknown waters. It was not long before the crews wanted to turn back, threatening mutiny, as all kinds of fears and superstitions troubled them. The courage and determination of Columbus was equal to every occasion, holding the crews to their work. Early on the morning of October 12, 1492, they sighted one of the Bahama Islands. They had found a new world. Columbus thought he had found a part of India, and so he called the natives there Indians. They have been called Indians ever since. But we know they are not. They are the Native Americans. We celebrate October 12th as a school holiday, Columbus Day. Christopher Colombo. Well, that's the next part, unless you wanted to finish or you wanted to finish.
That's good. That's good. And thank you so much for your help and support, brother. Give a brother a hand. Point being, and we're talking, 8th graders in the 1800s. In school, European children are taught that we're not Indians. And yet, people that look like me and you, in the name of scholarship, keep calling our people Indians and blacks. Helping to steal their birthright and talking about it's the real history. And so, not unlike what I was showing you with the demonstration of Mataoaka, how they just simply use pseudonyms to bury the history. And what they need for us to do in order for their successes is for us to pick it up and to continue it and pass it to the next generation. About 2 generations, politically and by heritability, they're dead. And this is where Drawley says black according to science means dead. He's not talking the etymology, he's talking about the social burial, the social pseudonym burial, and the operational effect of nom de guerre branding. And so he says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar. He said, we're giving back Christianity in the church to the Europeans. And so it's not a condemnation of Christianity because they're not dealing with Christianity, they're dealing with Constantinianism and unum sanctum policy under European colonial occupation of the Moroccan Empire. And so in order to bury the people, you reconstruct the history. It's quite easy. All you got to do is create certain passwords, interject them into the language, tell the people they have denotative application. The people, after a while, in the name of education, distinguish not the difference between the connotation and the denotation, pass it to the children. At that time, they're lost. And no further can they attach to the estate as long as they play into the code. But then if they have no reference with the codes, then they perpetrate it to the next generation. And this is how you bury people, and they're called the living dead. Thus, black, according to science, means dead. And so this is also why and how in law, persons who have lost their so-called civil rights are declared dead in the view of law. And of course, this is where civil liberum mortuus has its function, particularly at North America, etc. And I'll share that with you. But again, also like the Queen has said earlier, you know, scholars know. The interesting thing that you find is when you have people that have this knowledge and operate and in the name of scholarship on their own people and will attack people who actually are themselves scholars and seek to liberate the people. The attack will often come from those who you expect that love the people, you know, or have positions of power. Civil liberum mortuus. Civil liberum mortuus means civilly dead, dead in the view of the law. It is the condition of one who has lost his civil rights and capacities and is accounted dead in law. So it's not a physical death, it is a political and civil death. Indeed. Now keep in mind, in the restoration, from a knowledge perspective, qualifying the heirs for restoration of their estate, our illustrious prophet Noble Ali registered the Holy Temple of Science as a civic organization in 1925. You know, and of course, those of you who know the history knows the support that was given to the resurrection of our people by Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was teaching government and government structure, which is civics. And of course, when you deal with the FBI papers and infiltration operations, particularly COINTELPRO, you will see persons who allege to have respect for the Prophet Noble Ali and for Marcus Garvey will promote from their position that Ali never taught civics and that he does not teach civics, which means don't start enforcing that Constitution, y'all. You know, of course, that's what binds them. Right. But again, It's of interest to people to do research, and it's of interest to those who have knowledge to share it with people and give them some reference points so that the knowledge can become theirs and that you do not become a follower, but a fellow woman, fellow man, studying with other fellow women, fellow men in brotherhood, studying to redeem our people and to help in this great missionary work of helping to uplift fallen humanity. But again, the demonstration is the importance of rendering back to Caesar the nom de guerre that he's presented to you to show you how they're actually stealing the birthright. Now, of course, for those of you who know civil liter mortuus, for the balance of those who are listening, it's only fair that we deal with its reflection or opposition. For everything that has a front has a back. You know, so we're going to deal with in full life. And so that people will have a consciousness of the opposite of civil liter mortuus. So the opposite of civil liter mortuus in the political status is in full life. In full life, in law, is continuing in both physical and civil existence. That is, neither actually dead nor civil liter mortuus. And so, whenever you're talking about liberating our people, particularly those in North America under European colonial operations, what you're seeking to do is bring them back into full life.
Yes.
And so, by necessity of enforcement of the fundamental rules of operations, which is called constitutional operations, on the land, you will see, or you have heard, one of the statements made by Noble Drawley when he says, we are teaching our people those things necessary to make them better citizens. That is civics, direct and straightforward. I also would like to give you a caveat in the nation being divided against itself. And you can see much of it has to do with activity that took place with Mataoaka in their relationship with John Ralph. But I want to seize the opportunity to show you how the connection is in the Septuagint or the Bible, and take consideration on Rome's choice of tagging her Rebecca. And I'll go into the book of genetics, telling the story of Rebecca. Now, the truth about birthrights, because you're still dealing with the birthright issue. So we're going to go into the Bible, the Holy Bible, and the story of Genesis of chapter 25, and you know 2 and 5 is 7. So you got to even pay attention to even enumeration at all times. Is about the deception and theft of the birthright of Esau, and it implies the social, civil, economic, and political importance of loving, claiming, and acknowledging one's birthright. That's what that chapter is actually talking about. And Esau hated his own birthright and sold his birthright to Jacob. And understand, J in Hebrew is Yah. So Yaakov. So Esau sold his birthright to Yaakov. And Yaakov deceived Esau and coerced Esau into selling his birthright to him. Both Esau and Yaakov were in violation of divine and natal law, which is national civil law and moral divine natural law. Therefore, the truth about nationality and its relationship to birthrights must be made clear to both Esau and Yaakov. The act of despising one's birthright is the equivalent of not claiming to be one's own proper self. or acknowledging one's own existence. Like Esau, if you deny and despise your own birthright, can you argue that others wrongfully do not acknowledge your rights if you yourself do not acknowledge your own birthright? Esau's birthright was stolen by Jacob, and this constitutes fraud and is distinctly and clearly a violation. The unrightful act on the part of Jacob definitively violates all moral law and the laws of men, which are made to govern civilized behavior. If a man does not love his own birthrights, then he cannot love himself. If a man does not love himself, then nature, quote unquote, will cease to energize his preservation. Self-rejection of one's birthright is equivalent to self-hate. A man who is without his birthrights has no civil liberties, no true political power of self-government, and no economic control, or the moral right to argue or to demand that others love him. One who does not love self cannot love others. Thus, the moral code of law, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The act of stealing the birthrights of another man or people is parallel and equates to robbing the creator of a nation. This is a most grievous violation of divine and natural law, also of divine and national law. The consequence is the inevitable loss of one's own birthright and coerced civil death. And so, to the descendants of Abraham, the theft of the nationality and birthrights of the Aboriginal Moors of North America is relative to the theft of the birthright of Esau, as demonstrated in the Bible. The threats, the duress, and the coercion used by the European colonists occupying North America to steal birthrights of the Moors are founded in dishonor, deception, and being of disingenuous character, being expressly unlawful. The false and unsanctioned claim of sovereign power promoted by the European colony corporate states, persons, and their citizens are relative to the putrid actions, nature, and deceptive character of deceiving offspring, Jacob. The book of Genesis, birthright stealing story about Esau and Jacob, is one of the negative intrigue operations of an impostor exposing his moral and ethical imposition of fraud. That story allegorically translates into the civil arena as a demonstrative example of an ungodly act of vampirism manifested by social pilfery and is cheating in the affairs of men. This affirms the effect of negative colonialism, as well as giving an observable example of the corrupt practices exercised by those who have and are misusing the powers delegated as the trusted positions, the offices, and the seats of government. In another more poignant sense, it is a study of the transition of basic spiritual violations, moral and abstract, and reflected in the physical, social violations which are made or instituted by tyrannical and unlawful persons profiting and benefiting from the operations of corrupt governments. Jacob. And these in today's political and social venues are some of the major issues which are in dire need of healing. Particular emphasis is noted to those issues relative to the contemporary civil and social orders of the world, which are convoluted and against the honor and integrity of constitutional and allodial principles. The spiritual violations that were manifested as a struggle, quote unquote, and took place in Rebecca's womb are comparatively about a conflict or conflicts that cannot be expressed in words. Why? Because words are the children of thought, and thoughts are the seeds from which all things are made manifest. On another political level analysis, a lack of knowledge of history and law promotes ignorance and naivety. In a true sense of high culture, an actual function of the womb is that it is the first school show for things the divine beings made manifest in human flesh. And truth establishes that the womb is the stargate or physical gateway for men, male and female. And so, in a metaphysical sense, Rebecca's compromised thoughts were made manifest through her alienated sons, Esau and Jacob. And this was made manifest through the physical earth clay bodies used as physical vessels for the divine monads. And monads are the divine sparks of life. And this observable compromise was made manifest by the consequence of the Aboriginal Asiatics and their acts of genetic mixing. That mix was displayed through the amalgamated cells of animals creating the Occidentals. And this was made manifest as Moabites, Orientals, and the Albions, Occidentals, made manifest as the contemporary and false social codes reflected as black and white peoples, the two separate nations. And this was manifest as the loss of the Moorish nation's birthright. And this was manifest as the loss of the great estate. And this was made manifest as the colonization of the North Gate. And this is symbolized by the story of the royal princess, Pocahontas, heiress to a vast and magnanimous empire, Mataoaka. So Mataoaka is actually reflected in the book of Genesis. And that's one of the reasons they chose to name her Rebecca, because it correlates with the deception that Rebecca did with her two sons, with Isaac, because he was going blind. And she helped steal the birthright of Esau for Jacob. And so now Esau is sorry that he sold his birthright, and he's marching around wondering why he has no estate. And yet he gave up his birthright for a bowl of red pottage. Even the color of the pottage is symbolic, if you get the point. So the Bible is a multifaceted book of the ancient Central America, Moorish compiled. And this is also why the dark priesthood removed many of the books and don't tell you that the book is of dynasties and not necessarily just personalities, of dynasties. And those dynasties may span thousands of years. So anyway, the point is made that that's your book, not to be rejected. And one of the things that the prophet Nuhu said to the Moors, he said, don't get rid of your Bibles because I'm going to use them to condemn this government. And what he's talking about is the government of the priesthood that has been disguised when it's really in place to steal your birthright. So it is the government of Jacob, the government of Jacob. So the house of Jacob has been stealing your birthright. And so they're claiming to be Jews, and they are not Jews. Are we clear? Now, do you understand when you go into your history and you deal with the Niagara movement, and they murdered all those sisters up there near the Great Lakes where the sisters have been meditating for thousands of years. They meditate near the waters of the Great Lakes. And when they started to rebel against Rome, they murdered many of them, cut their heads off, threw them over Niagara Falls. And then they converted the Niagara Rebellion into what you know today as the NAACP. And it was taken over by some Khazarians, claiming to be Jews that are not Jews. And then they branded our people colored, and they paid off a lot of the so-called Negro preacher overseers who were prepared at Howard University and other so-called colored universities as overseers to control the dead offspring, i.e. the zombies. And they're called Negroes, Black, Coloreds, Coons, Shine, whatever they are this week. Heirs to the world's largest estate, don't know their home, don't know anything about birthright. They're marching all over the place on their own land, begging, while claiming to know Jesus, God, and Allah, and everything else. And they got about 59,000 organizations talking about rights, and not one of them teach about civics and Constitution principle, which absolutely deals with the issue of birthrights, inheritances, government, social duties, etc. So we have our honorable, illustrious Prophet Nobudrali that brought you back the knowledge of your nationality and your birthright. And the more research you do, you're going to find more instances, not just limited to Mataoaka. You'll find other things, and you'll find how easily the priesthood has buried you and buried your history right in front of your face and disconnected you, and then have people that look like yourself that you've trusted that also claim to be Negro, Black, and colored, that have been convincing our people in the name of scholarship that North America was Indian, is India, and we Indians, and Negroes and Blacks, etc., and you're actually at Maghreb, Morocco, the most extreme West. You're home, Dorothy, you just bumped your head. And this is, again, even when they use the allegories in The Wizard of Oz. This is why Dorothy's feminine, but she represents a nation. The yellow brick road represents the zodiac constitution of the ancient Moabite nation. Emerald City represents the green star of Venus, Hanail, sometimes called Anail, which is the holy name for Friday. And so Friday is the holy day for Muslims all over the world. You see the correlations? And they can tell you right to your face, and most of our people still don't get it. So when Mr. Trump was dealing with that senator and mocking her for claiming to be Native American, a lot of people started talking about Donald Trump is racist. No, he was just telling the truth.
That's right.
Because number one, he already knows that Native Americans was made up by European Dutch company operatives for Moors who would agree to compromise themselves, separate from their other brothers and sisters to perpetrate the schism or the division, thinking they was going to get some sovereign benefit. And then they come under the Bureau of Indian Affairs and get some special treatment. Of course, they got tricked too. You know, and then again, it's a known fact that the tradition of the European sociologists at North America setting up these powwows around the country is also to steal the birthright. So if any of you go to any of these so-called indigenous people's powwows, you see most of them is predominated by Europeans who let their hair grow long, plaited and stuff like that, and put on jade jewelry and stuff, run around talking about their Indians. And you get a lot of benefits too. And make claims on the land. Our people ain't caught one yet. You know, it's a tragic humor because a lot of our scholars on our side, you know, who've done research, who know these things, unfortunately, are more in love with the change that they get from the corporations to support black organizations and Indian organizations than they are to tell the people the truth that they're Moors. You know, so again, when they started making mockery of Donald Trump for picking with that sister, that European senator, calling her Pocahontas, etc., because what he's really saying is she's faking, trying to claim that she's native to the land, ain't never done nothing in the Senate, and she always talking trash to him. So that's what he was doing. He was actually, you know, picking with her. And because he was also giving awards to code talkers. And code talkers is a tag that the Europeans gave to a lot of the Shemite Moors. And a lot of the Shemite Moors are the ones that are usually the image that's given to the masses when they're talking about native people of the Americas. They'll give you the Shemites so that they don't show you the Olmec, the Aboriginals. You know what I mean? And the Shemites is usually the Tonto image. You know, and those mostly are Manchurian mixed with Moors. You know, they're indigenous but not Aboriginal. You know, and that doesn't deny them, but that's the imagery that the people have. You know, and so the Aboriginal or the true heirs still, you know, pretty much sleep as to what's really going on, with the help of a lot of their own so-called scholars who actually work for Rome. So again, I wanted to use the opportunity of some of the text from the speeches of John Warwick, you know, to show you that it is well known amongst Europeans that Mataoaka is her name, not Rebecca, not Pocahontas, and that she was a potentess and she was Muslim. You know, so again, as you glean through it, you will see how they muddy the conversation. On one hand, she's accelerated or uplifted superlatively in knowledge, in culture, etc. And on the other hand, she's the heathen. If you see the point. But we already know how that rolls, etc. So the rolling off the tongue of Donald Trump, of Pocahontas, with some who don't know the real history, they'll take it as a racial insult, like they say. But those who really understand know that he was telling her, stop faking. You know, don't be messing with me faking. You ain't Native American. We already know that Native Americans are the copper-colored people who we both know really ain't knew you've been saying it is. That's what he was really saying to her. So, you know, and this is, again, when you know the real history, a lot of things that some people have a tendency to get emotional about, you will not get emotional about because you look at it differently. You know what I mean? Because you know better. You know, and when you know yourself, you're not that sensitive about stuff like that anyway. You know, you don't fall into that energy, and you don't let them put their spirit on you, etc. All right. So, when that's one of the things I was looking for you. I was trying to put it on to do that. Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to know if you wanted to go for 25. Yeah, I got the Bible right here.
And then it also gave me an opportunity. You know, because you keep things simple. You know, you can take a little bit of historical information and really fluff it up, but truth need not be told in multitude of words.
Right.
But what I appreciate the opportunity to, you know, being taught by others, because you see more. You know, when you're presented with certain facts, because that's what it does. It brings up memory. Because really the memory is in all of us, you know, and even some things that we may assume that we're not familiar with, in fact, it is our history. And the history is not just in books, it's actually in your cells. You know, and if you can stimulate people in certain areas, they will actually recall things that they didn't know they know. you know, and they will interject those little pieces of the puzzle. Because it's not on, this is the truth. It is the reality of the human experience on earth is this. As the humans evolve, or what you would call ascend, when different beings come to different levels of consciousness and courage, when I say consciousness and courage, it is because you already know. But you also know that the dark priesthood are murderers. Yes. And they're thieves. And they're parasites. And when you're able, when once in a while a mother who has courage will bring a son or a daughter who has courage to speak the truth to power, in spite of the threats of the dark priesthood, they generate energy or electrical, it's actually electrical energy or vibratory energy that agitates the memory of those that are around them and those who may be actually in other parts of the planet, but may be along what is called ley lines. And ley lines are actually electrical grids that are on the earth that not only deal with balance or nodal points on the earth, but also correlate with the different animal species on the planet. And they navigate accordingly. Because of our assignment on the planet, on the humans, the developments, at different levels, different degrees, etc. And you have different levels of hybriding. They have a tendency to accelerate or activate at different times, if you get the point. However, what you discover if you pay attention to them, or to us, as you might say, that if you note a woman or man that the mothers bring who are closer to a knowing of their assignment or why their mother brought them here, and are less distracted, as all of us are anyway, that if they generate thought that activates any of the old memory, it will attach to someone else. And what that is, it's an activation, a vibrational activation of the ley line grid. Romans or Europeans will call it the 100th monkey theory, but it's not actually a theory, it's an operation of nature. All right, and now I'll give you an example. Some Nipponese scientists, Nipponese, you'll call them Japanese. Mm-hmm. They're Nippon, actually Nipponese. In Nippon, scientists were, they were feeding these monkeys on an island in Nippon. And they were giving them like sweet potatoes and stuff like that. You know, because they like the sweet potatoes. And they were examining them and doing both biological, intellectual, habitual sciences studies and looking how they develop, evolve, interchange, how they communicate, etc., and keeping notes. One of the things they noticed was this female, I think it was macaw monkey, I think it was. I do apologize. Go back and do some research to see the type, but I think it was macaw. And it was a female, about 18 months old, monkey. And she started washing her potatoes because she didn't like the gritty dirt on the potatoes as they threw the potatoes on the beach. And so the little monkey showed her mother that, right? The interesting thing that occurred was, as they kept notes, they started recognizing in other parts of the continent and in the world, other monkeys started washing their food. Then they started looking at correlations. And what they recognized is that it activated an electrical pulse grid. And they called the 100th monkey theory. And myself and the Empress, we were talking earlier, and the Queen, the ambassador, we were talking our conversations earlier, and with Dr. Naila. And we were logically talking about some of the things that concern us collectively as the people of the North, the Central and Southwest Africa, Southwest Amexem, and the reconnect that's being made mentally and politically in current events. And logically, the issue of consular courts and restoration came about in the conversation because there's other activities that they're doing now in their ambassador correspondences. And immediately it triggered my mind on effectiveness. Because as you all know, which is the common activity with the Europeans that occupied North America, their hostility to all Asiatic peoples and their, war machine that they practice under the unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery. And so when people have doubts as to the strength and the power that they have, or what their capacity to do, its limitations are, logically, the thing that popped in my mind was the 100 monkey theory, which is not a theory. And so I always say to all of you, and as we were talking earlier, and because we were busy, our conversations weren't completed, but we got pretty much deep into it, is be strong in your resolve to do that which is right. Because as you stay pure in your thought and your intentions to aid and help your people, that your sincerity rings that vibrational scale. And you don't necessarily have to be with someone to reflect on them or to activate them in concept of mind that actually brings cure to an issue. So always remember that when you know the culture of Earth, and this is why it's important for our people to really know or go back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers, because we lost a lot of confidence in ourselves and our relationship with the Earth, and thus abandoned a lot of the communication systems that were natural in our vibratory state with the Earth. And Rome has taken advantage of that and convinced us that our communications then only can come through a technology that he allows to re-enter into the social order with some kind of a payment. True. However, when you understand to the contrary, in spite of the pressures that are put on the people by Rome, that you would remember that rule and reattach your mind to the Earth's ley lines, or we call the ley lines, the electrical grid, and be true to yourself. And in doing so, you don't have to necessarily have a direct phone line to the rest of the club, for it will resonate. And it is no different than, we were talking, and the sisters came in from Honduras, and first thing, one of the things in the conversation while she was, because they're always studying, because we never sit still. And they were studying as we were talking, and she brought up the issue of the Moorish clock from the Alhambra, and it was just like apropos and divine for the moment. Oh yeah. And also, Dr. Naila did a DVD, a lecture on the 100th monkey You got any more of these?
I found two.
What do you mean you found two? How do you want to start stuff like that? I said, like, this is the new album. It's dropping today. 1 and a half.
March 17th.
100 monkeys, you can see it. Look, I'm putting it on the screen.
Anyway,
We can do more, right?
I said, open up the store. It's like open up the store. Mondays come in here. Lights and stuff. Right?
Don't laugh at me.
Because remember, everybody was talking about the sandwiches last week. Man, good. How many she got? I only got 2 rolls. 2 rolls. Light fires and everything, signs and stuff, passing out menus. Got 2 rolls left. Same thing. Should I get him some back? I'm gonna get some back, right? But that's actually divine law at work. And this is again why it's important for us to really to study the culture, because we've lost knowledge of our connection with nature and true divine law. Because when you have a knowledge of true divine law, you have courage, because knowledge removes fear.
Islam.
Because fear generates hate and injury. Dr. Naila, give us a little bit.
No, I just want to say that, as I remember, so I think this is...
Don't say you want your copy back.
No, I know. I got one.
I got one.
I got one in my hand. But I think at the end of this message, I ended with something that I think is very significant. And I said, you know, when you understand the so-called theory and how it works, you never know what that point is, the breaking point, if you will. It's not called a breaking point, but there's a point at which
the
apex is reached and it moves over. So that I ended it with the question, is it you?
Yeah.
And that is significant. If we each say to ourselves, it could be me. So my consciousness might be the consciousness, my move might be the move that, you know, makes a difference in the whole, you know, for everyone across the, you know, the diaspora everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I may be the one. Is it you?
Yeah.
You know, the question: am I the not monkey? But am I the one? Am I the breaking point? Am I the one that, you know? That
is at the peak or brings the apex.
Right. Yeah. And so that's how I left it. You know, with the question: is it you or is it me?
Yeah. And you know what? That was apropos, but I'm still a little disappointed when you talk about I only got 2 back there. I don't know.
We have a duplicator here, but you know, if I want to purchase,
say y'all make. That means next week.
Yeah.
You already know the deal. That is on too. You know, and that is the truth, because that's how nature works. And you know, when you look at the metaphysical or the Kabbalistic relationship to this, and to the confidence that you have when you understand how divine law works, this is reflected in the statement Yahshua made when he said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all other things will be added unto you." And this means that don't get distracted, not that you don't pay attention to, because the concerns of most of us is with the symptoms that are affected by what Rome does. When we should first study the root cause and direct our energy to it. And the symptoms will reflect. Not unlike, you know, the singing bowl. Mm-hmm. When you get the right alloy and you get the right shape and the circumference of a singing bowl, then you hit that right octave and tone, then it has healing qualities.
528 hertz.
And until you get to that point, it's irritating. You know, so for those of you, you know, if you know some of the culture, you know, people who know, they'll go some singing bowls, get some singing bowls, and they go try to get a cheap one. I ain't gonna buy no more cheap ones. Because it's vibration, it's tone. And so it is with nature, divine law. When you begin to harmonize with nature, she comes to your aid. And though Rome is formidable with their enmity against the human family, they mostly, if you really pay attention, you study patterns. They have no power except what you give them. Oh, they use it terribly, harshly on you, but they have no power except what you give them. They have no jurisdiction. But we give them jurisdiction because we keep believing in them. And we keep believing in the presentments that they present to us under a color of law. And then we seek to try to cure it with de jure or positive law, and then wonder why it's we have this placebo effect. The placebo effect is because we don't recognize that things created in color remains in color. And that you cannot take a lie and then have to destroy the lie with another lie, if you get the point. No matter how passionate it may appear to be to you, you know, because of the appearance of injury. Just tell the truth and let the truth dismiss the lie, you know. And is that actually that nature of understanding the operations of divine law, why it's rough on us, because I understand, because we're all, you know, in the physical form by the lower self, why it's difficult for people in the face of all of this crude opposition to learn to love instead of hate, you know, because love is the cure, if you get the point. But then when you know the history, it's not a naive love, but it is a love that reminds you to stay humble and to understand that while we came into this condition, yes, Yakub stole your birthright, but you gave it up to gratify your lower self. And then once you understand the dynamics, you can understand a lot of the lessons that the prophet brought us are actually on multiple levels, that if we really look at them, they're really ancient lessons for us to learn, you know, to study ourselves. But recognizing also for our evolutionary development on the planet, it is necessary, you know, not only that man eat not by bread alone, but also that man, in the reverse, it is not just a reading or what we would call the Kabbalistic gnosis, or which the masses loosely refer to as spirituality, which it is not. It's Gnostic knowledge, and then breathing techniques, which is spirituality, in order to activate the cell for extracting memory, and also for dispensation. The truth of comprehension and the necessity of people knowing the distinction between the knowledge or the philosophies, which is the religion, and the art of breathing, which is spirituality, and why it should be taught properly to the people is because that's part of the dynamics of meditative thought that actually begins to defeat Rome. And that being known by priesthood in general is probably one of the most egregious violations by the priesthood, and why Yeshua, who they codify as Jesus, condemned the priesthood for modifying the books or altering the books, saying that, you know, they're doctoring up the books, doctoring up the law. You know, they themselves know the truth, and they hinder the little ones from coming in. You know, and then they justify what they do, robbing the widow's pennies in the name of giving them spirituality, when in fact they were not. They're actually parasites. You know, and so again, this is why at least from my thoughts in some areas, why I try to look at some of the reflections that we have in the physical realm of the civil operations of the earth, and then try to tie them back to the offspring or the seeds, you know, so that people can look at this stuff a little differently, you know, and have a little more honor and concept of honor for their mothers and fathers, not because it's in fact historically true, but so that they can be more sincere, willing to be more sincere. And in being more sincere, then nature comes to our aid, you know. And so we're someone in the dark shadows uses legions of armies. One who has not legions of armies can use legions of knowledge, of activating the ancient memory and reattaching to the ley line electrical grids and then calling on the rest of the world. But the way that is done is with sincerity, which makes it difficult for all of us because of our lower selves. You know, and if you can, you know, conquer your own lower self and be knowledgeable that that's what you're seeking to do, you know, and humble yourself without being a punk. You understand? You don't need to be a carpet, but humble yourself. Then nature herself resonates with you, not unlike the essence that comes from a flower. It's like natural, but when it's not natural, it's poisonous. That's the other interesting thing too. You know, that's why it's important, you know, for us to be sincere, going back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers. And again, going back to the Mataoaka, that's another issue that I saw or that reflected when I heard all this rabble about Donald Trump and them talking about he's a racist, talking about Pocahontas to that senator. But I knew where he was coming from with it, you know, knowing the history. And then Dr. Naila said, Brother Abdullah, you know, has some things to do. Some things came up. And so, you know, I'm honored to, you know, to do this spot for him this Friday at the House of Reawakening Minds, etc. And as an introduction, you know, in support, those of you who had the honor of having some of his recent literature, Moors and Masonry, etc. I think one of the most important pieces of literature currently out there for helping to raise our people in a conscious level relative to the operations of government, etc., and the operations of history, right in line with the Mataoaka story, etc., the truth of her story, because it's important that our people get actually reconnected mentally and in the heart to this land and to self-government, you know, and because they have been deceived so strongly by their own people who help Rome mentally disconnect our people from this land, which is another reason why it's important to know the Mataoaka story, you know, because you asked, if you did a test, as an example, if you did a test with most of our people, like, you know, like when you used to, remember you used to do interviews sometimes?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you know, you see a lot of people that have come through, you know, keep talking about ancient Kemet, Grand Canyon, archaeological finds and everything. And if you brought up Mataoaka and that she's Muslim, they look at you like you out to damn lunch.
Or hang up and act
that's
like
current
they
history.
on the show no more.
Yeah, you know, that's current history. And not knowing, you know, the vital role that she played in the fact that the Europeans ruling here now in North America. It is that tight, that serious. You know, not unlike them talking about the political parties, but if you mention, you know, they talk about the Republican and Democratic Party in the politics, right? And then if you mention Horace Greeley, half of them don't know anything about Horace Greeley, but they're going to tell you about ancient Africa and they're standing on Africa. You know, and the interesting thing, the Europeans and their rituals and their secret societies with wearing Moorish garb, having parades right in front of these people's faces, and they're mentally disconnected from this land, talking about someplace else.
Right.
Very interesting. So I saw that well, it was almost like an automatic reflection. So when they started lambasting Trump for picking on the senator, calling her Pocahontas, because he was always talking trash, right? And they talking about he's racist. I understood exactly what he was saying.
Yes.
And so that inspired me to choose a lady called Rebecca tonight. Even though we didn't get into the refinement of it, the peripheral is important because it reattaches our people to the land, lets them know that she wasn't running around going, woo, 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 woo. She was a Muslim, and she was a potentess and an empress, and most potent power, political. So, and there's also a reflection of the great matriarchy standard that must be brought back into our culture. And so if you're talking about Asiatic African culture and you're serious and you're not, teaching the children about the matriarchy principle that's at the foundation of Asiatic African culture, you're not really teaching them African culture. Right. And so if, and I know a lot of people deny it, but it's absolutely true. Because I've talked to scholars, writers, and different people around, and they'll come with the African concept with a total patriarchal Roman state of mind, right. Which is not African culture, which is not African culture. It's just not. And so so much of the gathered information remains impotent but interesting data. You know what I mean? So what I'm seeking amongst us, and this also includes our conversations, Doctor, with the restoration of consular courts. And of course, and many other people know that we're communicating with people around the country who are dealing with the issue of consular courts. Yes, and that the matriarchal principle in the circle of the mothers must be emphasized, and that we also don't have to reinvent the wheel. We must become reactivated on the existing principles that already exist. We just need to be aware of them. You were going to interject.
I was going to interject, and I'm not sure whether I posted it or not, but I know Brother Shirley Moore was trying to get out of Atlanta, but the flights, he said, were canceled because of the flurries of snow that hadn't started yet. So, but he has a couple posts on his page, which if I haven't, I will post on my page, about what we must do to restore the consular courts.
Yes.
And some upcoming meetings that are going to be taking place. So yes. It's in line with what you're saying. All over the country, and not just the country, there have been even some inquiries in the Caribbean and in the UK.
Yes.
People want to know, brothers and sisters want to know how to, declare their nationality, how to do, thus and so.
Yes.
But I finally get it with you, and I've said this in the last few weeks.
Yes.
Most of what we have to do is just know who we are, and be who we are. Yes. And that's what kicks in the 100th monkey principle. Not all the paperwork and the jumping through hoops, but when you get it as to who you are and grasp that, and you're sure about it, and you just be that first in your heart.
Yes, and redirect our energies. In other words, when you look at us, you look in our communities, we have a lot of organizational activity. So there's no such thing as our people not coming together. We've always came together, whether church, mosque, synagogue, club, party, corner, whatever. The deal of it is whether or not we've come together with substance. And what the problem has been, what has proven itself out is that with all the energy and the economic, social, political input that we put in multiple organizations and activities, the lack of success indicates that our concepts have been wrong. Now, the will or lack thereof to examine that and to start filtering out things that are dead, meaning things that are of no real value. Sort of like the Bible says, sport and play, meaning that don't enjoy, you're not denied the right to enjoy life. But when you spend too much time sport and play, the good things get past you, type things. And it's not, you know, a negative has a tendency to manifest more when you're spending too much time BSing, to put it bluntly. Bullshit, to put it bluntly. You know, and the experiences of our lives for many generations, if you're looking at it from a geometric and a mathematical perspective, just a scientific calculation, it's called failure. You know, and so if we love our children and if we have respect for those who've gone before us and sacrificed, and if we have love and respect for divine order whatsoever, we will examine what we've been doing, start measuring the success rate and the lack of success rate, and start chopping off the ungainly parts that do not work, and being willing to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, predicated on the truth of the fact that the bullshit has not worked, to put it bluntly, you know, and start looking at those things that work, that are predicated in principles, maxims of honor, and then start promoting those principles amongst our own people. And then, just like any other seed, watch how the moon and Venus interacts with it and see if it germinates to that which is good. And if it doesn't, don't plant it again. You know, it's simple math, you know, and harmonics with nature. And that, again, is a harmonic with the conversation that I was having earlier with the Empress and the Ambassador. We didn't complete our conversation. We're still working on it. But that's the direction that our conversation will go into. You know, so we actually, the Ambassador was showing me, she was sharing with me some current events that are taking place currently. And because we have to do this class, some of our conversation had ceased at the moment. But would you like to share, since we're going to be talking anyway, some updates? Remember when you came to the kitchen, you showed me some updates. Look what's going on right now. Would you like to make some comments?
Yes, I would.
Yeah, because I mean we're already you know, dealing with some of these things now. So I want to expand.
Thank you. What's interesting is that right now, if you have been apprised of what's going on in central Amexem, there is currently a dispute over what corporate president is going to be in charge of the entire Honduran region. What makes that very much an intrigue to the natives that have always been there, particularly those who were at one time bequeathed crown land that was stolen anyway. I'm just going to break it down. It's like I steal a book and then I say, okay, here's your book. It's my book, but here's your book. You can hold it. You could be in possession of the book. And I can go away because you're in possession of my book. But I can come back and say, this is my book. Because you was just only in custody of the book. It didn't belong to you. You was in possession. Do you understand the difference? You can hold it, but it's not yours. You can read it, but it's not yours. And when I get ready to, I'm coming back for my ish.
Yeah.
Because it's mine. Right? It's mine. but he was in possession of it for a time. And so what's interesting right now with the shenanigans of the politricks, because that's what it is, the shenanigans of the politricks, the people of the land, the people of the region have revolted. All you got to do is go on CNN and Espanol and see the images. Go on CNN if they're broadcasting it, because they're all stuck on what's going on this part of Africa. But on that part of Central Amexem, the fire has been lit. Literally, the estates of the region are on fire. And what's interesting is that the native Bay Islanders, the natives of the mainland, the native Lanka, Mayans, okay, the native Tawakas, the native Chorties, the Petch, who else? Oh, and the autochthonous group that I belong to is the Garinagu Nation, Garifuna. And you know the difference is, my brethren and sisters?
Come from the ground.
Yes, we're autochthonous.
That's right.
But we began and have never stopped beating the drum.
Come on.
We've never stopped beating the drums. And that is what has fueled and allowed Gaia, Mother, Terra, to begin to make the energetic movements, because the Schumann resonance has changed.
All right. Ley lines.
The ley lines have changed. And when the Schumann resonance shifted, the drumbeat of the land became louder. And it affects the heartbeats of those who dwell on these lands. And so there are no monkeys here. There are no monkeys here.
Wow.
What it is that one heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the heartbeat. It's the heartbeat. And so what is happening, I'm missing home so much. But I know that the last 3 years as the ambassador of peace and awareness and consciousness, brethren, we walked that island with kufis on our heads. And it was just me, and then it was just me and her. With kufis on our heads. They called me crazy because I used to wear green flip-flops. But I was there with the green light to be who I am. And my green flip-flops, they gave me the green light to walk the land. Because I am the green light of the land. I'm the plantain, the green bananas too. Because the yucca, you know. Dr. Saber used to say the yucca is cyanide. Too much yucca accumulates in your brain. And in the Caribbean region, it particularly affects us very much because that cyanide accumulates, and then you have the emotion of rage. And if you know Caribbean people, they fire up quickly. But it's the food that we are eating, right? But back to the green flip-flops. Those green flip-flops defined my walk that got me here, although I'm wearing New Balance. Because I'm on a New Balance. The ley lines have changed, and we all have to rebalance. And the only way any of us is really, really going to integrate and digest the message of Mother is to align with Mother's breast milk. The organic, foods that we're supposed to be eating is the only way that we are going to be able to absorb this information. This book is thick. If you don't have the neurosynaptic processes connecting, your download is slow. You on AOL. We can't afford to be on AOL no more. The planet is already going through the photon belt. We entered the photon belt, which means all this ish that nobody's ever wanted to deal with, we've become the pink elephant. And you got some stuff to deal with.
There you go.
Deal with it. Deal with yourself. Excavate. You know, I was telling Sister Dr. Nyla this evening, or maybe yesterday, you know what's going on, all this movement with, I'm like surrounded by Pisces right now.
Oh, no.
And it's a beautiful thing, beautiful energy, beautiful people, a lot of emotion. Air. I don't always compute, but I'm learning. And when you're around your brethren and sisters, hey, fire, water, air, and earth. And if y'all don't know how to air bend, blood bend, water bend, earth bend, y'all gonna get left behind because what's going on is planetary.
Yes.
Y'all get stuck on the spiritual.
Yep.
That's all good. But what is spirit? And what is spiritual? Define that. And when you tell me how you define that, tell me who told you the definition. And what made them the authority to define that? Because it's all about words, right?
Right.
And words have power. So we ought to begin to really do the work physically, physiologically,
Yes.
socially, psychologically, to balance ourselves. We live in a society where there's too much adrenaline, too much cortisol, and now it's a loop. Every day, everybody's pissed off about something. I'm angry. I have a beautiful friend. He's like a son from another lifetime, like maybe 10 lifetimes ago. And I know this in my soul. And when I reconnected with him, he said, I'm angry. You 3. I'm angry. I'm angry. I said, but you 3. Name is power. I start paying attention. His beautiful name is Josiah. It means Jehovah is exalted. Whoa. He chose to be my friend, so I start paying attention. He even fight for me, the time with me. It's beautiful because I'm being taught something by a child. And what I really got when he was walking around the house talking about I'm angry, I stopped. I said, what is he angry about at 3? But he was clear. He identified the emotion. I am angry. Well, baby, what are you angry about? He couldn't tell me. Because it's the air he's breathing. Understand what I'm saying. Them ley lines up there is making him angry. Did y'all get that?
Yeah.
You walk out there, what are you breathing? You're breathing a contrived stratosphere, atmosphere, environment. And then y'all come here and try to do your best to digest this. So I'm going to tell you how you're going to really make these connections, the neurosynaptic processes, pop for you. Water. pH balance of your water needs to be 8.8 to 9.5. Okay? If you really want to accelerate your awareness, a gallon. Essentia. Essentia is one brand that I found as 9.5. I will believe it's 9.5. You understand? Because the word essentia tells me water is essential to me. Words have power. And I learned on my journey with Dr. Sadie that 8.8 to 9.5. Don't go over 9.5 because your bones get porous. It's too much alkalinity. So you need balance. I like 8.8. I like the number 8. Circle of 8. I like the 8. The 8 works for me. You understand me? But so if you really gonna value your time here, 3 days before you get here, start drinking that water with some lime. So when you get here, you don't have to explain too much because you've been preparing to get here and get your lesson on, and then you all have access to this. Because right now, y'all download it from me. There's a whole bunch of intracellular communication happening right now between us. We are literally one. And every time I do this, y'all are my matrix. I am the matrix. You are the matrix. You are the matrix. Because in Spanish, the womb is matriz. That was a clue for me. La matriz. The womb. Right. So, the long and short of all I'm saying is this. We all talk about love, sing about it, write poetry about it, but what is it? I'm going to give it to you in one word. Water. Think about that. Water transmits, transports, transfers, transforms, transmutes, and stores energy. Transmits, transports, transfers, transforms, transmutes, and stores energy. That's what water does. So if we all drinking this water and alkaline in a little bit, we will accelerate the communication. And whatever he hasn't told, you will get anyway. Because that's what time it is right now for us. Yep. We need to catch up quick, get over ish quick. So what, you rolled your eyes on me? Can I get a hug anyway? That's what time it is. Each one, teach one, save the baby, save yourselves.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, good. Islam.
Islam, brother.
Islam, brother.
I'm Douglas Eugene Bey.
Islam, brother.
XL Douglas Eugene Haynes, all caps. I'm here from Texas.
All right, bro.
That was
I was telling the sister that my shuttle driver from is here already. I thought it was going to be done by 10 to take me back to the airport. But I have a couple questions.
Yes.
One of the things that I want to say is that I've just come into this light here recently, maybe 3 or 4 months, and I'm trying to get into the next steps after nationalization. And one of those steps are you mentioned in several of your videos, and I also heard Sister Delilah mention that in some of her videos about setting up the trust. And I know that's the next step in that process, and I wanted to get a little bit more insight on that. And I believe the sister said that that information was on the USB drive that I got from whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's good, yeah. You have any Moorish science temples in the area? What area are you from?
I'm from Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
I've checked a few, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and they all are, in my opinion, more passive than active.
Well, so, no, but yeah, but keep in mind there still are institutions.
They are, but
and we have to clean them up. But as far as that, you still keep that communication. Keep that in mind.
I do keep that in mind. But one of the things that I've noticed that since I come into this, that myself am so far behind in knowledge that I wanted to get to a point to where I've got some consistent knowledge.
Translation, you're ready to graduate.
Correct. Because in the end, it is more for my grandchildren than for myself. So I need to be in a position to where I'm able to teach them as they're growing now.
And it's like the ambassador was saying, you know, and this is, you know, all things in time, but this is one of the things where there's a lot of misunderstanding in the Moorish Divine and National Movement. We have the unfortunate reality of your same experience, where people, it's sort of like the sun's out and someone's trying to tell you that it's not. And, you know, and they often run into that, and it gets kind of disappointing. However, you know, keep remembering that that's still our institution. Because we need more than enough communication for those who are coming. However, I understand your quest, and we do what we can here to try to share enough information that, you know, will keep you busy for a minute. You know, and we try to hit those areas that affect our people most directly, most immediately, and also those things that will send them on a journey of learning and that will present enough studious challenge that they become independent thinkers, but at the same time be veiled maxims of ethics and law and universal principles that, you know, they're not distracted with BS. Because I do understand the plight. You know, however, it is our duty and responsibility to send people to the temple anyway, if you get the point.
I get the point.
However, we do know that if we're going to fix things, we got to get to work. You know, and so that's why we're here at the House of Reawakening Minds, because we're active and not passive. So, which is one of the attractions that we have. And I know that you recognize, and I'm appreciating that too, because a lot of people do recognize that this is a nation's work. It's not limited with us and not limited to us. However, we must be universal in our thoughts, universal in our thinking, universal in our activities. And we know that the Prophet Nuh was universal, and his principles and philosophies are universal. However, we do know that some people try to promote that he is not, but we know better. The interesting thing is that the activities on all fronts of the planet today command people to be active. And if you're passive, you have a good chance of becoming fodder. And you recognize that. And I do appreciate the fact that you're making that grand effort to save your babies. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take active and not passive. Passive people will become food in this generation.
Literally.
It's unfortunate, but that's a political reality. You know, and like we always say, we can't stop the bloodshed, but what we can do is limit it. But yet, every man, every woman, and every child must confess their own. Therefore, passivity is dangerous in the reality of things. So I appreciate you on that fact. And I'm going to give your brother a hand for coming in from Texas. And hope we do some good, too, brother. Hope we do some good. And Dr. Naila, you know, I mean, that sister works. Yes, you do, man.
Thank you.
And she keeps enough things posted because she's very universal and broad-minded too, and she has that multifaceted capacity of thinking. So, you know, even though she has a load, she always shares enough to pull anyone up, you know, out of the doldrums. So she can take a little grain of limited stuff and see something good in it and pull that up and clean it up. You know how like people walk across it, walking in the driveway, they don't pay attention to nothing, and she walked through there and seen this little thing that you thought was a pebble. Next thing you know, she got this thing shining up, and that's the way she looks at life.
Yes.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And she can take, you know, little experiences of life and make them so poetically, beautifully clear. And that's a natural thing with her. You know, so I appreciate her on that, you know. on that level. And she's not to be boastful about it, she's a very brilliant mind.
Yes.
You know, and a jewel that we should protect.
Indeed.
You know, so keep up with her because she keeps up with us. and she throws, you know, that rare seasoning in the soup. You know what I'm saying?